Dignity in leadership. Here we are, chapter 3. Pretty exciting, pretty exciting. So, all of this, right? Don't need to repeat any of this. All of this, that we're going to do all of this stuff, right? We all know that. Great. Well, let's get
Mm-hmm.
right to the content then. So, this
Mm,
chapter is about trust,
mm,
and trust has many, many, many possible interpretations, and there's been a million books written about it. And our approach is to see trust as something practical, as a skill, as something we can all develop, something that we can build, maintain, repair. So really a working tool. And it's not, in our view, what a lot of people grew up thinking trust is. So that's what we're going to investigate today. And we're going to ask you a few questions today. So you don't have to answer them out of the book. You can, but you can just answer like, what do you think about trust? Because we want to hear everybody's perspective. So here's our opening statement that all bonds are built on trust, and without it, you have nothing. One of the things that I learned about trust as I was learning about trust is the critical role that it plays in organizations and in leadership. Because if you think about it, sometimes I've heard people say there's no trust in our team, there's no trust in our organization. And I'm like, well, that's a little dramatic because actually, you wouldn't have an organization if there wasn't some level of trust. You wouldn't have a team because it's the glue that binds us together. It's the glue that allows us to interact with each other. So I take a view of trust that it lives on a scale, that sometimes trust is low, sometimes trust is high, sometimes trust is in the middle. More trust is not better. But there's rarely a situation where there's no trust because if there's any kind of relationship at all, there's some level of trust. So the question is there enough trust to do what we want to do together or not? And if not, is there something we can do about it? Marcel?
I like the idea that trust is the foundation of every relationship, right? So the level of relationship I have with my son really is the level of trust that I have with my son. Can I trust him with all things all the time? Or can I trust him with some things all the time? And vice versa. Can he trust his dad with some things all the time? So I would say that trust is the foundation of every relationship. And Dan said it, right? So we have terms in the business world. We call some people vendors. We call some people suppliers, and we call some people partners, value creating partners, and trust is associated with them. When I was growing up as a kid, we learned about Sesame Street and cooperation. But today, everybody has to collaborate, a different level of trust between competitive relationships and cooperative relationships and collaborative relationships. And each one of them has a different level of behaviors and trust. So, yeah, love it.
So here's our chapter bullets, and there's maybe more to these than appears at first glance. One of the things that I started noticing when I learned about trust, and it was in the context of coaching, is that when people talked about trust, there was often this kind of moral undertone. There was this idea that if I said I trusted someone, it meant I thought they were a good person. And if I said I didn't trust someone, it meant I didn't think they were such a good person. And what the challenge with that, we can use that interpretation. And it's one that I've found most people have buried in the background of their interpretation of trust. The problem with that is that if I believe trust is a moral issue, then I can't say to Larry, you know what? I'd like to work on the trust I have for you because what he can hear immediately is, oh, Dan thinks I'm a bad person. But if we take it out of that context, then we have a tool we can work with. So for me, this is a huge one. And what I found in coaching in particular, or in working with teams, is that when you can Set this interpretation aside, and you can just see trust as a risk assessment tool. Suddenly, you got a tool that everybody is willing to work with. The second thing is this, just that it's logical and it's practical. There's nothing uh, airy. There's nothing ungrounded about trust. Is that, we assess trust. It's our responsibility. We need to do it. It's practical, it's logical, and really the most effective use of trust for me is as a risk assessment tool. Am I taking too much risk interacting with you or getting on a plane or eating a spinach salad? Because it's what keeps me safe. So more trust, not necessarily better. The right amount of trust is the right amount of trust. And that's this bullet. You decide. You decide. There's no right or wrong about trust. We can trust too easily, too much, and get ourselves into trouble. We can struggle to extend trust to people, in which case we may spend a lot of time alone. But the idea is that it's up to us to regulate trust for us. What works for us? And nobody can tell us that. That's something we have to learn and we have to determine and we have to practice.
One thing that I've learned after 31 years of marriage is I'm the person who gives trust up front. My wife is at 98% skeptical, which is slow to trust, slow to trust. Both are at the other end, but they're both very what? Important in a marriage. My mom, I had a friend in second grade. His name was Greg Badgley, and my mom would say, "Don't hang around with Greg Badgley. I don't trust him." Now he was a great kid. He and I just did knucklehead things at 6 years old. So mom, my own mother, said, "Bad kid, can't trust it." She saw it as what? A moral issue. And so guess what? I grew up with that kind of a thought process. Can't trust them. They must be a bad person. So that's not something that's genetic. It is something that is taught. And then the last thing I got to think about is when I work with people and they say, "I don't trust anyone." That's not for me to decide. That's for them to decide. That's something that they are going to then start to think through what? The consequences of not trusting. And that's where everything kind of unfolds. Marcel can be too trusting, and my wife can say, "You're so naive." There is an upside, and there's also a side that says that's not so helpful. So there is two different ends, and I seem to explore them quite often.
Mhm.
So we have a question for you. So what is trust? So help us finish this sentence. Like, here's what trust is to me. Here's what I believe it is. However you understand it, because we all have an interpretation of trust. What's yours?
I totally associated with trust as a moral thing.
Mm.
Really, so in thinking about this, you could be a bad person but trustworthy. You could be a good person and not trustworthy. So that just, I mean, that kind of messes with my mind a little bit because I think that I've equated the two. Like if this is not a good person, they are equated with a non-trustworthy person. So for me, trust is um, uh, has been a moral issue. So I would say a morally good person is trustworthy.
Lovely. Well, in some sense they are, but again, if you make it about they're a good person or a bad person, it takes us in a different direction than if we just see it as a risk assessment tool. So again, it's not wrong, but I think you come by it honestly because to be honest, almost everybody I've ever worked with, when we work with trust, that's where they begin. They begin with this idea, even if it's not overt, but once you investigate it, they begin to see that, oh yeah, I do make this association. Huh, I wonder if I could think about trust without making that association. Thanks, Larry. Marie.
Hang on. Here I am. I already was in this frame of mind, but you've just reinforced it and given it some stronger legs. I think I've always known that trust was situational. And I have not, it has not been my tendency to have a blanket trust, full trust or lack of trust about anyone or any situation. And now I think you make me realize that I'm situational in how I evaluate trust. And it's more than that, it's trusting to take action. I think that the other thing that occurs to me is that lack of trust blocks forward movement.
Hmm.
Um, from the simple question that if I have to get up in the middle of the night, or if I get up in the morning, I do that based on the trust that my legs are going to be underneath me.
Hmm.
It's and an absence of trust happens when people become unwell, perhaps in some way, and start to not trust their bodies, um, to do the things that they've relied on in the past.
Yeah,
So those
lovely.
are my 2 cents.
Yeah. And we're starting out this conversation like we might a lot of conversations about this is between me and other people, but your point is well taken. What do I trust in the world? What do I trust in process? What do I trust in my body? What do I trust? Trust
Yeah.
is everywhere. It's part of every single choice we make because we always have to assess the risk of whatever we're doing, whatever we're deciding to do, even if it's just standing up when we get out of bed. Maybe a little prudence would be helpful because trust isn't as strong as it used to be. Yeah, so
Yeah.
fabulous. Fabulous.
And it's like emotion. I think it's present in every action,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
in, in every movement to act.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Jennifer Jackson.
So yeah, I think historically, trust for me, I would view it as like an emotional response, and I wasn't like, quite sure like why or how I was having that emotional sense, right? Like I was just like, well, to your point, I don't trust this person, and so whatever it is about the vibes I'm getting weren't or were working for me. Um, but I think as I've moved into my coaching space and have explored more this idea of trust, to your point, like disassociating it from this moral construct and seeing it more as, you trust someone because they are trustworthy. So the things that they are doing that engender to say, I should trust you. So how they're showing up, the experience they're creating, um, through whatever, their reliability, or I can trust what they say, or um, I don't feel like they're out to get me. So their self-orientation, like there are things now that become a lens for kind of guiding that sense of trust, which I love because I love a good
Hmm.
framework. And then the fact that I can think of trust as something that is created and not
Hmm.
just is, it was a big unlock for me to then
Yeah.
understand, like, well, why might I not be trusting this person? What is happening in our relationship, our experience that is decreasing this level of trust? And do I need to change that? So it's definitely been a journey that I've been on to see trust as kind of like a construct, and that gives me insight to your point of view of what is happening in this dynamic with this person or this individual that is making me feel more or less trust.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Jennifer. Joe, what's trust to you?
So for me, trust is being able to to have a sense of security and confidence when dealing with someone. So that's one way I look at trust. The another way I look at trust is having the ability to predict that someone will act in a specific way or ways and is dependable. I can predict it. Uh, so these are two functional definitions that I have created for myself to define trust for myself.
Yeah, thank you. Ken Roseboom.
Yeah, I love the topic of trust. I think it's most important, or I think it's very important to just remember that trust is an assessment. It's my assessment, and it's not that is trust high or low on a 1 to 10 scale. It's that is it am I assessing my trust accurately?
Hmm.
So, and just owning that assessment. I'd offer up the idea of trust in myself or self-trust. Can I trust myself to do, to be reliable or sincere, whatever it might be? And, and I and I think that's really helpful with people that maybe that are low in the trust area. I used to think I had a neighbor that I called my zigzag friend. And that just meant that if I was thinking almost ready to zag on a decision instead of zig, I'd go to them and say, "What do you think? I could zig, I could zag." And they say zig, you got to zig. And I'd say, "I know that zag is now my answer now." You know, so I could trust that, that I don't want, I do not share their perspective or how they look at it.
Hmm.
So I think it's valuable to understand where and how you trust people that you may not agree with.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Melissa.
To Marcel's example earlier about his wife being highly skeptical, being highly trusted, that's kind of my dynamic as well. I've noticed with a couple of different key people in my life. But it strikes me that if I look at trust as an emotion, what's kind of feeding that emotion for those various instances? And I think it could be um, choices of emotions like optimism or pessimism or denial. And what's kind of ironic to me is that if those are the things that are fueling that trust, that's what I'm putting out there. And that usually has to do with what I get in return. So as an officer, I was taught in the academy, don't trust anybody. And I went out there and it's like everybody's out there to kill you. And so if you go out there with that mentality, it may save your life, um, but it also creates this kind of energy from other people, right? And so I found it much better serving me to go out there thinking, okay, show me who you are, and then I will determine kind of what trust level we're going to
Hmm.
have. And that energy is then what fed the encounter, and I'm sure what built that kind of nebulous thing that we call trust out there in that interaction.
Lovely. Thank you, Melissa. Great example. Brenda.
Hi. I First thing that comes to mind for me is that trust is cumulative. Like over time, there's like the level of predictability that someone's going to be or act in a certain way. It's the first thing comes to mind for me. And it's like getting out of the whole moral judgment piece of it, because that's easy to slip into. But like I had a boss once that was didn't I felt like I couldn't trust him to have our best interest at heart, but I could trust that he would behave in a certain way predictably.
Yeah,
So I might not have trusted him with my best interest or the team's best interest, but I could
yeah,
trust that he would show up typically in a certain way.
yeah, yeah. Lovely. Wonderful. Well, great examples. So all of them valid and all of them inform how you make choices. Marcel, do you want to
You
talk
bet.
about this?
So a couple of things that, you think about when it comes to trust and as an assessment. One of them would be sincerity, one of them would be reliability, and one of them would be competence. Are those the only things that Dan and I said you can trust? No, but these would be some big ones that generate trust. So for me, it's very important that I always am reliable. My definition of trust is commitments met over time. Yeah. And as an alcoholic, those are things that you don't do when you're under the influence. And so I've got to work on trust of my intentions, trust my integrity, trust my judgment, and trust my competence. Sincerity, that's a big one too. So reliability is I make a commitment to Dan that I will show up on a Zoom call and guess what? I'm there. I was having a heart attack and guess what? I was there. It was that important to me to have a heart attack and make sure Dan knows, hey, I'm not going to make it on the 7 o'clock. He goes, you look awful. I know I'm hanging up now. So it was pretty great. Reliability is one that I love. But here's the other challenge. I start to judge others who aren't. Oh, so we should all behave like Marcel? That's interesting. Wow. What if they're late? Where do I sit with them? Think of sincerity. Think of sincerity. The internal and external, what I'm saying is actually what I'm going to go and do. And then competence. Competence, is Marcel a competent dad? Is Marcel a competent husband? Am I a competent co-founder with Dan? Am I a competent participant on this call? My capacity, my capability. And what Dan and I notice is sometimes when people we work with, they may not be able to do everything that they say. It's not their sincerity. It's really not their reliability. It's their capacity. They were overextended and they really couldn't kind of keep the commit that they gave to us to navigate what we wanted to do together moving forward. So there's a couple of things that pull away on trust. There's a couple of things that help generate trust. And each and every day, I know I've got to do what I say I'm going to do. I got to complete what I start. I'm going to always say please and thank you. And then guess what? Be grateful along the way. So these are a couple of things that we noted in the book: sincerity, competence, and reliability. But again, it's your perception. It's your perception of where those sit with you. Dan?
So there's a couple of kind of overarching things about this model for me that are valuable to think about. One is that however we do trust, whether we believe trust has to be earned or whether we freely extend trust to people, whatever our preference is, as Melissa was pointing to, often I've seen that we've learned that growing up. We've learned it from our families. We've learned, how do our parents extend trust to others or not? Did our parents believe that you had to earn trust, or did they just give it out freely? So I grew up in a family where they gave it out freely. Now, some people thought that was foolish. Some people thought that was naive. I've done things that are foolish and naive. Why? Well, I just learned. That's how I learned to do it. So I have to intentionally focus on this model sometimes, because the other thing about it is we tend to gravitate towards one of these circles more than the others in our assessments of trust. So you can pick your circle. I'll tell you mine: sincerity. Marcel told you his: reliability. So if somebody's sincere with me, I'm like, sure, I'll hire him. I'm sure they're good at what they do. They're being sincere. They're not pulling my leg, right? So sincerity, I base a lot of my trust on sincerity. Is that always helpful? No. Sometimes it's a horrible choice, because sometimes they are not telling me what they're thinking. They do have a hidden agenda. And sometimes they are being sincere, but they're not competent. They don't have the time or they don't have the skill to do what they say they're going to do. And sometimes they're just not reliable. Right. Their reliability is 7 times out of 10. My standard is 9 times out of 10. In my view, they're not reliable enough for me to extend trust to them. So there's a lot of dimensions to this. It is my assessment based on how I see them. And the thing about this that's fascinating to me is that I can be 100% in sincerity. I can be at 100% in competence. I can be at 100% in reliability, and you still might not trust me. You still may choose to not trust me. Fascinating, isn't it? And vice versa. So we only have a limited capacity to influence people trusting us. And it's up to us to do exactly this: is to assess and recognize that it is my interpretation. And my interpretation can be wrong. It's fluid. It changes because the person changes, the circumstance changes. So it's not a fixed thing, but this is a model that I find extremely helpful. One of the things that this model doesn't show, that's sometimes added, is another circle that says care, that people really care about you, the situation, etc. So the model is malleable. You can add things, you can change things, but for me, this is the core. When I'm trying to figure out that sensation that you were talking about, Jennifer, like, something's going on here. I don't really trust something here. What is it? Is it their sincerity in my interpretation? Is it their competence, their capacity, capability, reliability? Ken Roseboom.
Yeah, my favorite topic again. I like the care circle being included. In that I kind of liken it to my doctor. You know, he's got diplomas on the wall, and over time, I've developed confidence in his competence. Fairly reliable. I show up. I'm seeing the doctor within a reasonable expected amount of time, and sincere, in that I think he listens and tries to tell the truth. But the bedside manner, even when he's busy, he'll give 15, 30 seconds of how's the family. So I believe that he cares about my outcome for me.
Hmm.
And I think in business, that gets to partnership if we care about each other's outcomes and goals and desires. So someone can tick all the three boxes and be telling the truth and everything else, but if they don't align with my outcomes, then trust doesn't get to 100% for me.
Yeah, great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Jenny.
Thank you. What I really like about this, and I too, and with Ken, I would add care, but especially with those three, and when we're talking about leadership, is we always think of trust from our perspective and forget that just as much as I'm deciding whether I trust you as a leader, that person is deciding whether they trust me. And so that two-way piece becomes really important. And we always talk about, oh, they've got to earn my trust. Well, actually, when we look at this is a vehicle to help us say, what am I doing in this relationship that will help build that trust? And we've got
Hmm.
control of that.
Yeah.
So, am I living into competence as a leader? And the other thing I'd say, I think leaders, when they're looking at their team, competence and reliability become dominant. And the team, when they look at the leader, sincerity and care become dominant. So, there's
Mm.
immediate mismatch in what we're looking for in trust in our
Yeah.
workplaces as a team structure.
Wow, good
Keep in mind.
connect.
One little five-letter word, and look at that. Look at all
Mm.
there is. Wow. Larry Brown.
I feel like so much of the time everything's hidden. So one of the things that I just find that each category is in our minds and in our hearts, and there's not a hanging it before us. Like we don't really have a cultural permission to say, hey, the trust is low, whether it's your trust or their, but to be able to talk about it because there's all this stuff going on in me and I'm evaluating sincerity and
Hmm.
competence and reliability, but I don't really say what's going on. And then they don't really say what's going on. And I really don't have a way of saying, hey, you know what? My trust is low because your reliability has been wanky. I don't, you usually don't get that overt with it. So I would say the way we deal with trust is covert
Yeah. Love
in
it.
a way.
Fabulous. Marcia? Oh, we're not hearing you, Marcia. I'm not sure. Doesn't look like you're muted, but we're not hearing you. Sometimes technology is reliable and you can trust it.
How is that?
Some, oh, much better. Thank you.
Turned it all off, turn it back on. There we go. Sorry for the delay there. Um, I've seen a really close correlation too between vulnerability and trust. And I don't, it probably lands in the care and sincerity buckets, but a couple examples. One CISO was not trusted by women in his organization because he had a tendency to talk over them and dismiss them in meetings. And there was a very large meeting where he actually said in that meeting, I am working on something. I know that I tend to talk over women in meetings. And in that instant, there was trust developed, with that leader. The perception of that leader completely changed. And then I know in my own case, I was given a project really that triggered me, a lot of, lack of confidence in this situation by a very demanding leader. And I just said, I'm really scared, but I'm brave and I'm going to do my best. And that was all he needed to give me the reins and just let me go with it. And so it's just, there's this softness that comes with some vulnerability in this space, I think.
Wonderful examples. Thank
Hey, Dan.
you. Yeah, please.
Before we head out, I want to make one comment on what Larry said, which I think is very true. I can trust Dan. What I'm saying is I need to trust Dan's trusting behaviors. Trust is invisible. It's like what Larry said, it's invisible. What I'm saying though is I trust his sincerity behaviors, his competence behaviors, his reliability. If you listen to what Marcia said, there is a huge correlation between someone being unguarded and trusting. And I think it does fit into that sincerity bucket. So when someone says to me, I don't trust anyone, there is an implication of that where now I'm not going to be able to be what? Connected to humans kind of at a deeper level. So, Marcia, I think there's a great correlation between being vulnerable and trust. And Larry, you make a great conversation about it's invisible, so I can only see the what? The visible. I got to be able to trust your behaviors is what we're looking at there. Thanks, Dan.
So here's four key ideas that we boil this down to. The first one we already talked about. Trust is not a moral issue. It's a risk assessment tool. Again, we're saying that like it's a fact, but actually it's a choice. How do you want to see trust? This is how I think trust is most helpful. And the whole value of it is it keeps me safe. It keeps me from doing things that are beyond the level of risk that I'm willing to take. Does that mean I won't risk anything? No, but there's a level at which I'm not willing to risk anymore. And it could be in a conversation. It could be in this being unguarded and revealing something about myself. It could be something physical, right? It could be even having certain conversations. If it feels too risky to me, then what will I do? I won't do it. Because why? I don't trust sufficiently to do it. It doesn't make me wrong. It doesn't make the other person wrong or bad. It just means we can't interact. Anything on that one, Marcel?
Nope, all good. I think we got
Okay.
that one. Yep.
The second thing that's really important is why wouldn't you trust your financial planner to fill a cavity? Well, because trust is domain specific. We trust in domains. And there are people who will say, I would trust that person with my life. Well, maybe they would. Maybe that's true. But more often, we're willing to trust people in certain domains, in the domains of their competence and their capacity and their reliability and associated with their sincerity. And this is really important because we can get ourselves in a lot of trouble trusting people who have not mastered the domain in which we're choosing to trust them. Yeah. So I'll give you an example in my world, which is trust and not trust with Lucy. Okay, so do I trust Lucy, my wife? I trust her in a lot of things, a lot of things. Do I trust her to be ready on time when we agree when we're leaving the house? I do not. I do not trust her in the domain of being ready to leave the house on time. And it's abundantly clear that it's an impossibility for her. And she knows that, and she acknowledges it. And that's our lives. But it's okay. It doesn't mean she's a bad person. It just means that in that particular domain, I would be foolish to believe her every time she tells me I'll be ready at that time. That's all. It helps me assess and adapt and adjust to what's going on in my life. But this is true in so many, even little tiny ways, all every day that we have this. So when we can get clearer on that, in what domain do I trust somebody and at what level? And in what domain do I choose not to because it's imprudent to trust them in that particular domain? Marcel and I laugh a lot about the domains in which you should not trust us. You should not. You should not send us a long email because we won't read it. You should not trust that we will read it because we won't read it. You shouldn't, right? There are things that you should just not trust us with. Are there other things that we think that you can trust us with and not risk too much? Absolutely. But there are things that clearly we are not trustworthy in that particular way. You don't want to invest your trust with us. You don't. It would not be wise. So if you want to know what those are, we'll send you a list later, but there's plenty of them. There's plenty of them. Marcel?
One thing that I want to make a note of, there's an emotion called dissatisfaction. And if you are in a relationship, so I trust first and then we start to do the work, and somebody might be, let's start the work and I'll trust along the way. Both are awesome. One thing about the emotion of dissatisfaction for me is it allows me to see something's missing. And is it capacity? Is it competence? Is it sincerity? Is it their judgment? So something's missing. Now I've got some places to go and do what? Architect. Maybe start to tweak, shine, and polish something. Make a recommendation. Maybe ask for clarification. What's kind of going on here? It doesn't have to be a blanket, I don't trust you. Now it can be just like what Dan said, trust you, yeah? And in this one area, how can we work better together? What do you need from me to better pull us together here? So, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Number three, you can't force anyone to trust you. The best you can do is create the conditions and make it possible. Like I said, I could be 100% in everything. Maybe you still don't trust me. That's the way it works. So nobody can force me to trust them. I can't trust anybody to I can't force anybody to trust me. The beauty of that, though, is it has me striving to create the conditions that you can trust me. Why? Well, because then you'll interact with me. Then we can do stuff together. So for me, it's valuable to pay attention to my own behaviors, to my own sincerity, my own competence, my own reliability, because that opens up more possibilities that people will trust me. But that's a choice I make. Not everybody cares about that. I do, so I pay attention to it. And it's up to us. We have to do that. We have to do that work. We can't just expect people to trust us because we think we're trustworthy. It doesn't work. Marcel?
One of the things that Dan and I talk about is it takes what it takes. What's it going to take for them to trust me? Nobody knows. I don't know what it's going to take for them to trust me. All I know is I've got to do my part, and it takes what it takes. That's why we have an emotion called perseverance, which says I'm going to try new ways to ensure that my son, who's 27, trusts his dad today. So perseverance allows me to continue to create the conditions to make that possible trust bond happen each and every time we interact with each other. So we're not only seeing an emotion of trust, but we're seeing other emotions that might enable it and other emotions that might pull it apart. And it doesn't take very long to pull a very, loving relationship apart. Yeah. Dan?
And the last of these is that trust can be built. It's not that it just exists or doesn't exist. We can build it. Ironically, there has to be a little bit of trust to build more trust. If there's really not trust, we got no place to begin. So we can build it. One of the things we sometimes overlook is maintaining trust, to keep checking. So, you know what? I work with Marcel every day. And yet, you know what? It's always a good thing for me to say, does it feel like he's being sincere? Is he competent? Does he have the capacity? Does he have the reliability that suit me, that are sufficient for me? Because that's how we maintain trust. People change, situations change. Sometimes people become less competent, right? Somebody mentioned getting older. Yeah, sometimes we become less competent. Our memory, our driving skills, etc. We can strengthen trust. So even though Marcel and I and many of you and I have great trusting relationship, could we make it even stronger? Sure. If we paid attention to it, if we got clear, we could strengthen trust. And often we can repair trust. And the beautiful tools that we've created for that are the apology and forgiveness. Those are two of the main tools. And how do we repair trust? We offer an apology. When we can do that with ease, it goes a long ways to helping reestablish trust. Marcel and then Ken. Marcel.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is what I've experienced in marriage is there's a rupture in the relationship, and are you willing to do the work to repair? So with rupture comes repair if you're willing to do the work. And a lot of the things that I've learned is the work starts here. It's not trying to change Susie. It's not trying to blame throw her. We just went through a rupture in our relationship. Got to look internal before I start looking external. So when I say willing to do the work, yes, it's together, but also too, there's some work I've got to do first. Then I can extend and say, how are we doing there? So yeah.
Ken.
Yeah, I just got a kind of a new hit, a new insight for me that, trust can be repaired. And so in my experience after the apology and the forgiveness, it's kind of like, well, what are we going to do now? And that kind of goes to the third bullet, because a lot of times you'll create the conditions of satisfaction all over again.
Yeah.
How will we stay in contact? What does it look like when we're done? What is it? All those things. And so Marcel, when you talked about, well, I'm not satisfied, I'm unsatisfied. Well, what would make you satisfied? And that's kind of doing the work, as you said. Yeah. So I hadn't quite put those words together like that yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Melissa.
Yeah, I've been super excited about this conversation when I put it into the context of faith and trust, and particularly in my spiritual domain, and how that, faith is often associated with, we put this faith in something we can't see. That might be God, it might be eternity, it might be things that, we've yet to experience, we don't have evidence of. Um, and yet I think having this delineation between faith and trust is what allows people of faith, I think, to move forward with things. Because what always seems to be a tripping up point is I think or I believe that I have faith in God for things that I don't have proof of, or, and I'm okay with that until my child dies, or my spouse leaves me, or I lose my job, or I don't know where my finances are coming from, or whatever. And so then it becomes an issue almost unarticulated of, I have faith in God, or I have faith in this higher being, but I don't have trust. And so then these four ideas about trust, of how we can then build that or not, according to what we think will enhance our lives. But, does your higher being, does your God have, are they worthy of that trust in a risk assessment? So how do you judge their competency, their reliability, all of that? And I know it seems a little like, silly in a way to bring moral or, mortal kind of things into this spiritual domain, but I think it can be really helpful when it seems as though faith doesn't get us where we need to go, where we really need to decide trust. So do I trust that God will provide, for instance, when I've lost my job and I don't know where my next meal is coming from? Some people do and some people don't. And some people may find that because they put their trust in who God is. Some people might put their trust in previous experiences with it themselves. Some people may put their trust in other people's relating experiences with God, and how God came through for them or whatever. So I find this very fascinating and very helpful in separating out these as two different emotions and what they can do for you.
Like we said, trust is everywhere. So even there. Thank you. Yasmin.
Yes, so I just want to share one observation. I mean, you're so right, Dan and Marcel, is that, it takes us so much of perseverance to create trust. You have to be very sincere and, reliable. You have to be competent at all your interactions to create that trust with that person. But, unfortunately, it just takes one wrong incident to break that trust. And then, you have to just start all over again. You have to probably work on forgiveness or apology. But it's so difficult to build trust with people, and it just takes one wrong interaction to break it.
Thank you, Yasmin. So somebody almost said this earlier, but one of the things I've noticed about trust is that often in relationships, we build a kind of trust bank. Meaning, if I've been all of these things for somebody, and then I do make that one error, Yasmin, or oversight or misstep, is that having that previous history is often very helpful in rebuilding trust. So I would say, I'm not sure we start over, but we may take a step back and we may need to rebuild something. But I think this is part of the reason for, in my mind, why would we want to continuously build trust? Because it gives us something to fall back on, to rely on, the basis of a relationship. So for me, that's valuable because I would say, Lucy and I break trust with each other, but we don't start over because why? There's a long history there. So we have credit with each other in a way. Now we can't rely on that forever, but it does help us get through certain situations. But yeah, lovely.
Yeah, trust bank. Yes.
Trust bank or bank account or trust credit card or trust IRA, whatever you want to think of it as. Okay, Marcel, we're
Well,
going to make
somebody brought this up, right? It's not about, I think it was Jenny who said, hey, it's not just about I look out at the world and I go, let me judge and see who I trust, right? So there's trusting others, yeah. And so a couple of things that we're thinking, you don't have to answer these now, but think about someone you would like to trust more. Yeah. Is it a relative? Is it a neighbor? Is it a friend? Is it a friend of a friend? The second thing to be thinking about is which of the three elements might it be that you could say we might need to dial this up on the sincerity or the competence or the reliability? And do you need to do more in your relationship with them? Yeah. So there's always that idea of how do I go and grow this relationship and the foundation of it being trust. Again, there's so many different things. These are three that we find to be very, very big in building that trust. Number three would be how could you request what is missing for you? Remember, I'm not talking about the person, I'm talking about the behavior. I'm not talking about the person, I'm talking about the behavior. That's what I need to see more of, or maybe less of this one thing over here. So, yeah, who do I trust? Who do I trust? Yeah. I think those are the three things that we are asking for you to maybe think through moving forward. I don't think we were thinking of you to answer those
but
right now,
you
but you
can if you
can.
I wouldn't name names, but if this is an exercise that I've done a lot with groups, a lot. And it's fascinating because if I ask people to, for yourself, write it down, work it out. Like, what is it here? It's fascinating how often they come up with something and say, oh, okay, well, I think it's reliability. Okay. So what do you need that you're not getting? Your standard is different from their standard. Okay. How do you bring those into alignment? So I think that a lot of times the things we wrestle with people, the misalignments when they have to do something with trust, we can resolve them. We can do something about them. We don't have to just suffer them. Marcia?
I'm kind of having an aha moment right now. It ties in with many comments made today, but that looking in the mirror first, like if we are not trusting, I'm, maybe we're a leader and we have a team and we're not trusting some team members, and there's a lot of frustration and there's some control happening. To look at the mirror in the mirror first, like where on this in this trust model am I perhaps lacking? Perhaps maybe it's sincerity, because I'm not really sincerely wanting to help them. I'm ticked off and I want to control the situation. And like where are we coming from in this model? And uh, I appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Samantha.
I think for me, one of the biggest ahas on this, and it goes back to a few slides earlier, is that there's usually associated emotions that go with trust, like what we've already talked about, and digging down below. Okay, I don't trust this person, and asking yourself, not just the elements, but asking, okay, what do I feel? What are and naming those
Mhm.
emotions that probably like people were talking about. I don't feel, you know, faith in them. I don't feel satisfaction. I don't feel or I'm missing certain like my emotions are telling me something's missing. I'm unhappy, I'm hurt, and something else behind it. And then what do I have to work through? Dial up or dial down to use the model to get to a place where I can approach trust through a more logical lens.
Mhm.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
layered.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. Ken.
Yeah, I kind of using a integral model of thinking or doing and being. In my model, the competence and reliability in terms of what do you need more of, usually it's a doing something. Could you be here on time? Could you take a
Mm.
course? Could you demonstrate something that's a doing? Sincerity, and I put care in that category too. It's a bit more of a being thing. It's
Mhm.
not what you said, it's how you said it.
Mhm.
It's the being part. So I think you can also overlay the emotions that help and hinder in all those domains. But the request is, it's easy to say, could you just be here on time? And what emotions might help? It's a little more touchy to say, hey, can you work on your tone? Can you work on
Mhm.
on some of these other aspects that to me are more in the sincerity and care areas.
Yeah. One thing I discovered about sincerity is sometimes we presume that everybody knows how to be sincere.
Hmm.
And what I've learned coaching is that's not the case. There are people who are very sincere about being sincere, but they're not capable of being sincere. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Many of us grew up in situations where, you know what, if we told the truth, it might be dangerous. We might get in trouble. So what do we learn? We learn to say something which wasn't really what we were thinking. And if we do that long enough, we begin to lose the distinction between sincerity and insincerity. So I have coached people and I have worked for people who were very sincere about being sincere, but my assessment is they weren't capable of being sincere. So this is a whole nother level we can take this to. Like, wow, maybe they have to learn a whole new competency that they thought they already had. Brenda?
Yeah, that's a lot to think about. I was gonna
Sincerely.
sincerely, we talked about perception the last time,
Hmm.
and I was just thinking about how the perception that we bring to
Hmm.
others and a situation really plays into how much we're able to trust, or the speed at which we can trust somebody. Like my mom lives by herself, and I've noticed that she's very cautious. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking, like, if I lived by myself, I would probably be more cautious than I am.
Hmm.
And so it just like this additional layer of that we need to take into account, like, where's that person coming from? What is their situation? What's their perception of safety?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So we got one more exercise for you to do before we go, and that's others trusting you. So it's the same
Mm.
exercise in reverse. So you think about someone you would like to trust you more and put a name on it. Like, who is it? Where would you like to strengthen trust? Could be somebody who already trusts you. That's fine. But where would you like it to be stronger? Where would you like to elevate that? And then which of the three elements do you think you could elevate that might create the conditions so that person would trust you more? What might they be? And then how specifically, like how would you do that? It's great to have the idea, but you got to do it. And the question is, well, is there somebody? And I would say we all have somebody like that. We all have somebody we want to trust us more. So how could we, again, how could we do the work on ourselves to create the conditions so that people could trust us more easily in for some reason, for some purpose in some domain, right? How would we do that? And the last question is, of course, if you have an insight, share it. So this is trust. This is trust for us. There's more there. There's lots we can explore. We could do this for a week and talk about trust. There's so much there. There's so much possible. But I think to give people a beginning place, and one of the biggest beginning places for me is when we say, could we think about this as not a moral issue? Could we think about it differently? Could we think about it as just how we coordinate action with each other and with the world? Maybe that would be a great beginning place. Marcel?
So in closing, I'm reminded what Ken said about me, and that once a relationship goes through a little bit of a rupture, it's time to get to work. Having the good intentions without the work, I'm patient on outcomes. I'm impatient on action. And so I behave my way out of this trust. Now I've got to behave my way back into it, which requires me to do some work here and begin to what? Behave that way. Behave my way back into this. And so, when we have a very low trusting relationship, it might be a little bit more competitive. Then, Bert and Ernie, cooperative, a little bit more fair and equitable. But at the highest level, we aspire to have a collaborative. And the middle word of collaborative is labor. And that's what's required to get that trust. I'm going to have to labor in my intentions, labor in my judgment, labor in my sincerity, labor in my competence, labor. And just like when we learned how to drive, they taught me to exaggerate. With Dan, I want to exaggerate my timeliness. I want to exaggerate my competence. Why? Because it's so important. This relationship's I'm going to look left and right. I want him to see that. I want him to experience it. Because why? I've only seen him face to face 3 times in 5 years. So it's very important for me to have that exist. Even when we're not in proximity, we can still have connectivity. And that's something that I got to tell you, it's pretty special. And you know when you have it, and you know when you don't have it. So it's just kind of one of those things. So I loved the conversation today. So thank you, everyone, for getting out, getting here. Chapter 3. Next week, chapter 4. Let's all reserve the right to be smarter then and trusting our way into the relationships that we see to be most needed and necessary. Dan, anything else? I took the
Nope.
last minute.
Thank you.
Bye, Sam. Bye, Vaughn. See you later, Yasmin. Bye, Joe. Bye, Elaine. See
Bye,
you
Marcel.
later.
Bye, Dan.
Bye, y'all. See you,
Bye-bye.
Roger.
Roger.
Bye, Ken. See you later, Jenny. Bye, Dan.